Lord, give me strength. That's what I was muttering under my breath that Tuesday morning, sipping my Earl Grey on the porch swing. Nice, peaceful morning it was supposed to be, arthritis acting up something fierce. But the sun was shining, birds were chirping, and I had a new book by that lady who writes the mysteries set in Scotland. Then they showed up. Charles and Bethany. Fresh-faced, all teeth and promises, practically bouncing up my walkway. Sure investments, their card said, printed in a font so slick it practically slid off the paper. I swear, you can smell the snake oil a mile away, even with Jerry and his infernal leaf blower going full blast across the street. He was meticulously cleaning up every single leaf, one at a time. Honestly, you'd think a hurricane had blown through. It's always something with that man, isn't it? Always gotta be the loudest, the busiest, the most Jerry. Mrs. Parker, Charles boomed, flashing a smile that could sell refrigerators to Eskimos. Bethany, bless her heart, had a slightly less predatory gleam in her eyes, but she was definitely on board with the whole charade. We're with Sure Investments, and we were hoping we could have a few minutes of your time to discuss an exciting opportunity. Well, isn't that special? I said, taking a slow sip of my tea. I gave them my best little old lady smile, the one that makes the youngsters think I'm about to start talking about my prize-winning begonias. An opportunity, you say? At my age? What sort of opportunity could a woman on a fixed income possibly be interested in? Charles, smooth as butter, launched into his spiel. Guaranteed returns, ground floor opportunity, limited time offer, blah, blah, blah. He was talking about some new tech company, something involving, well, honestly, I stopped listening after the third mention of blockchain. Back in my day, we invested in things we could see, things we could touch, land, buildings, maybe a nice set of government bonds. This sounded like monopoly money. Bethany chimed in, her voice all sugar and honey. It's a wonderful opportunity to secure your financial future, Mrs. Parker. We understand the importance of a comfortable retirement. Oh, sweetie, I said, batting my eyelashes for extra effect. My retirement is plenty comfortable. Social Security, a little nest egg, I manage just fine. Besides, I added, feigning a confused frown, I don't rightly understand all that fancy technology stuff. Blockchain, is that like cryptocurrency? Charles chuckled, a condescending little sound that made my blood simmer. It's a bit more complex than that, Mrs. Parker, but we can certainly explain it to you in simpler terms. Oh, please don't trouble yourselves, I said, waving a dismissive hand. I'm just a simple old woman. Numbers confuse me these days. Used to be I was the sharpest bean counter in Atlanta, but, well, age does things to a person, doesn't it? This old brain ain't what it used to be. I tapped my temple lightly, hoping they bought the act. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really must get back to my book. It's about a murder in a Scottish castle, you see, and I'm just dying to find out who did it. They pressed a little harder, of course, they always do. Charles started talking about generational wealth, about leaving a legacy for well, I don't have any children. My dear Harold and I never had any. Didn't feel the need. Not a loss, more of a choice. Bethany tried a different tack, emphasizing the low risk and high reward, as if I was born yesterday. All the while, Jerry was across the street still fussing with those leaves, revving that damn leaf blower like he was starting a plane. I swear, the man must be deaf, or maybe he just enjoys torturing the neighborhood. He probably heard every word they were saying too, nosy busybody that he is. probably already imagining himself sipping margaritas on a beach in Cancun, courtesy of Sure Investments. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to politely usher them off my porch. "Thank you so much for your time, Mrs. Parker," Charles said, his smile a little less dazzling now. "We'll leave you our card. Please don't hesitate to call if you have any questions." "Oh, I won't, honey," I said, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "You have a blessed day now." As they walked away, I watched them head straight for Jerry's house. I saw Jerry practically vibrating with excitement. He even stopped the infernal leaf blower to give them a hearty wave. I sighed, took another sip of my tea, and opened my book. But I couldn't concentrate. Something about the whole encounter just didn't sit right. The way Charles's eyes kept darting around, the way Bethany's smile seemed a little too practiced, the way they kept pushing even after I told them I wasn't interested. Were these sure investments too good to be true? Lord, give me strength. They were back the very next day, bright and early, armed with glossy brochures thicker than my Bible. And Jerry, bless his heart, was out there again, this time with an edger, buzzing away like a demented dentist. You'd think he was preparing for royalty. "Mrs. Parker," Charles beamed, holding up a picture of a smiling couple on a yacht, "we just wanted to follow up and leave you with a little more information about Sure Investments. This couple, the Millers, were able to retire 5 years early thanks to us." Bethany chimed in, her voice as smooth as butterscotch. "And this," she said, flipping to another page showing a graph that seemed to defy gravity, "illustrates the potential growth you could see with our diversified portfolio." I peered at the brochure, squinting my eyes for effect. "Diversified, you say? Is that like different kinds of things?" I asked, my voice a little higher and wobblier than usual. Charles's smile faltered just a tad. "Yes, ma'am. Stocks, bonds, real estate, a variety of assets designed to minimize risk and maximize returns." "Returns, huh?" I tapped my chin, pretending to think hard. "Now, remind me, what kind of returns are we talking about? My memory ain't what it used to be, you know? Getting old is a real kick in the pants, sweetie." Bethany jumped in. Her voice is smooth as butterscotch. "We're projecting a 15 to 20% annual return, Mrs. Parker, risk-free." Risk-free. That set off alarm bells bigger than the ones at the fire station. Nothing is risk-free, especially when someone's promising you the moon. I shuffled my feet a bit. 15 to 20%, you say? Now, is that before or after taxes? I always get so confused with those taxes. They're just highway robbery, if you ask me. Back in my day, taxes were a pittance, I tell ya." Charles cleared his throat. "That would be before taxes, Mrs. Parker, but we can certainly connect you with a financial advisor who can help you navigate those intricacies." "Intricacies," I repeated like I was trying to learn a new word. "That's a big word. Does that mean complicated?" Bethany laughed, a little too brightly. "It just means there are a few things to consider. But don't you worry your pretty little head about it. We'll handle everything for you." Oh, they would they? Like vultures circling a carcass. My blood was starting to boil, but I kept my voice light and airy. "Now, what was that company name again? Sure Investments? Sounds mighty sure," I chuckled, the sound a little too close to a cackle. "Yes, ma'am. We're very confident in our ability to deliver results. We have a proven track record." "Track record, you say? Like a little train going around and around?" I asked, batting my eyelashes. Inside, I was screaming. I knew I had to play this just right.
I glanced down at my Apple Watch, subtly starting a voice recording. They wouldn't suspect a thing. Old ladies in technology, right? They probably thought I still used a rotary phone and wrote checks with a quill pen. So, let me get this straight, I said, leaning forward and lowering my voice. I give you my money, and you make it grow like magic beans, and it's risk-free? Exactly, Mrs. Parker, she said, her eyes gleaming. Simple, my foot. This whole thing smelled like a catfish left out in the sun. Now, how much money are we talking about here? I've got a little nest egg, saved it up over the years, penny by penny, from my dearly departed, bless his soul. He would have loved to see this. Charles shuffled his feet and looked down at his notepad. Well, Mrs. Parker, we recommend a minimum investment of $50,000 to really see significant returns. But of course, we can tailor a plan to fit your individual needs. $50,000, huh? That's a lot of money. Where am I going to get that money? I have it spread around here and there, And how will I know if it is safe? Is it FDIC insured? I asked sweetly. Well, our accounts are managed by professionals. Everything is safe. Bethany continued to assure me. I made a mental note about that because something did not sound right. Honey, give me one moment. I have to run inside. The kettle is probably whistling, but you stay right there. Don't go anywhere, I said as I turned and walked into the house. I knew that kettle was not whistling because I just made tea, but I needed a moment to settle myself. I wanted them gone, but I also needed them to stay. Can I keep up this act long enough to find out what they're really up to?
Lord have mercy, I needed a plan and quick. I muttered to myself as I stood in the kitchen, staring at the floral wallpaper that I put up with George back in '78. That wallpaper always calmed me, reminded me of simpler times when a bad investment meant a burnt casserole, not losing your life savings. I took a deep breath, splashed some cold water on my face, and patted it dry with a dish towel. Time to play the part. Back outside, I shuffled slowly, feigning breathlessness. Whew, that tea kettle gets me every time, sweetie. Now, where were we? Oh, yes, the money. I gave them my most innocent, slightly confused look. Ms. Parker, Bethany began, all smiles again, we understand that $50,000 might seem like a large sum, but believe me, the returns are substantial. We're talking about doubling your investment within a year, maybe even less. Charles nodded eagerly, his eyes practically bugging out of his head. It's a sure thing, Mrs. Parker, a real game changer. A sure thing, huh? I said, tilting my head and pursing my lips. Well, back in my day, the only sure thing was death and taxes. But I guess things change. I paused, tapping my chin thoughtfully. Tell you what, before I commit to anything, I need to talk to my banker. He's been handling my accounts for years, ever since George passed. He knows my situation better than anyone. Bethany's smile faltered just for a split second, but I saw it. Charles shifted his weight again, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. Score 1 for Helen. Of course, Mrs. Parker, Bethany said, recovering quickly. That's perfectly reasonable, but I must stress this opportunity is time sensitive. We're only offering it to a select few investors. Time sensitive, eh? I chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. Well, at my age, everything is time sensitive, honey, but I won't be rushed. I'll go see my banker and I'll give you a call. With that, I ushered them off my porch, waving goodbye with a trembling hand, arthritis acting up again. As soon as their shiny black SUV pulled away, I marched inside, grabbed my purse, and headed straight for First Atlanta Bank, my old stomping ground. Now, I wasn't about to tell just anyone my business.
so I waited until my favorite teller, Sweet Mary Sue, was free. Mary Sue has been working there for at least 15 years and knows more about the comings and goings of Atlanta society than the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. "Mary Sue, honey, how are you?" I asked, sliding my checkbook across the counter. "Mrs. Parker, it's so good to see you. How's that knee doing?" "Oh, I replied, waving my hand dismissively. "It creaks more than the floorboards in a haunted house. But I'm here, aren't I? Listen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Mary Sue's eyes narrowed slightly, her professional demeanor kicking in. "Of course, Mrs. Parker. What is it?" "I had some young folks come to my door today talking about a sure investment opportunity. Called themselves Sure Investments or something like that." I watched her carefully. "Have you ever heard of them? Do they have accounts here?" Mary Sue tapped away at her keyboard for a few minutes, her brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, she looked up, her face grim. "Mrs. Parker, I've searched our entire system. There is no entity called Sure Investments with any accounts at First Atlanta. Are you sure you heard the name correctly?" My heart sank. My gut feeling had been right. These people were nothing but snake oil salesmen. "I am sure, honey. I am very sure of that. Thank you, Mary Sue. You're a lifesaver." As I turned to leave, my cell phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Bethany. The audacity. "Hello?" I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello, Mrs. Parker. Bethany here. Just checking in to see if you had a chance to think about our offer." Her voice was sickeningly sweet, like cheap candy. "As a matter of fact, Bethany, I was just thinking about it," I said, walking to my Buick. "Wonderful! So, are you ready to take the plunge? We only have a few slots left, and I wouldn't want you to miss out on this incredible opportunity." "Well, Bethany, I'll have to think about it. It is a lot of money, I'm not sure if I can spare that kind of money. Are you positive I will get a return? Is there some kind of guarantee?" "Yes, Mrs. Parker, we are very positive. Just tell us where you bank and we can get the paperwork started." "I'll have to think about it. I will call you in the morning." "Okay, Mrs. Parker," she said, her voice losing its saccharine coating. "But don't wait too long. This offer won't last forever." I hung up, my hands shaking. They wanted me to name my bank. Why? So they could drain my account? Show up at my house? Were they watching me right now? I started the car, my mind racing. I needed to do something, and fast. But what? Was I walking straight into a trap?
"Lord have mercy," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "Drained my account, you say? I'd sooner swallow nails." Back in my day, you worked for your money. You didn't try to weasel it out of some poor widow on a fixed income. I drove home, the scent of Earl Grey from the tea bag I'd tossed in my purse doing little to calm my nerves. As soon as I got in, I kicked off my shoes, damn arthritis acting up again, and went straight to my study. My old iMac, bless its heart, was probably older than Bethany. I fired it up, the dial-up modem sound making me nostalgic for simpler times. I typed in Charles's name, then Bethany's, adding the word investments and complaints to each search. Honey, what I found made my blood boil. Page after page of forums and articles popped up. Seems Charles and Bethany had been running a similar scheme in Florida a few years back, promising astronomical returns on some revolutionary tech company that never materialized. People lost their life savings, their homes. One poor soul even mentioned something about a Ponzi scheme. Then there was something about Charles having a connection to the phantom factors. I quickly skimmed it, but it was boring legal stuff I didn't understand. Bethany, it turned out,
had a rap sheet for petty theft and bounced checks stretching back to her teens. The audacity of these two, targeting seniors, preying on their vulnerability, it was disgusting. I printed out everything I could find, the printer whirring and spitting out pages like it was as outraged as I was. I was just rereading a particularly scathing review of their Florida operation when the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole. Charles, standing on my porch, holding a bouquet of lilies. Lilies! The nerve of this man, as if a few flowers could wipe away his deceit. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my hair, and opened the door, putting on my best little old lady act. Charles, what a surprise. Come in, I said, ushering him inside. Mrs. Parker, it's so good to see you again, he said, his smile wide and oh so fake. He handed me the lilies. I wanted to bring you something to brighten your day. How thoughtful, I said, taking the flowers and immediately placing them in the trash can by the door. I'm afraid I'm allergic. Would you like some tea? I just brewed a pot of Earl Grey. I knew he hated tea. He wrinkled his nose slightly. No, thank you, Mrs. Parker. I just wanted to follow up on our conversation. I know you had some concerns about the investment, and I wanted to assure you that we've taken them to heart. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. In fact, we've revised the contract to offer you even more favorable terms. We're so confident in this opportunity, Mrs. Parker, that we're willing to guarantee a return of 25% in the first year. 25%? The man was practically begging me to take his bait. Oh my, I said, feigning surprise. That does sound tempting. But, I'm just a simple old woman. I don't understand all these fancy financial terms. My late husband, God rest his soul, always handled these things. Of course, Mrs. Parker, Charles said, his voice dripping with condescension. We understand. That's why we're here to guide you every step of the way. Just sign here, here, and we'll take care of everything else. He pointed to various sections of the contract with a gold pen. I squinted at the pages, pretending to struggle with the fine print. Well, I don't know, Charles. This all seems very complicated. Maybe I should have my lawyer look it over. His smile faltered for a split second. Oh, there's really no need for that, Mrs. Parker. It's all very straightforward, a formality, really. And time is the essence. This offer won't last long, Really? Why is that, Charles? I asked sweetly. He shifted uncomfortably. Well, Mrs. Parker, these opportunities are rare, and we only have a few slots left. But if it's such a sure thing, I emphasized the words, why are you so desperate to get me to sign up right now? He opened his mouth to answer, but I cut him off. Charles, I've been doing a little research of my own, and what I found is disturbing. All this talk and the revised contract, it all sounds very generous of you, honey. Too generous for my liking, much too generous. His face paled slightly, the sweat starting to bead on his forehead. I could smell his desperation rising in the air, acrid and sharp like cheap cologne. What are you implying, Mrs. Parker? He asked, his voice losing its smooth veneer. Oh, I'm not implying anything, Charles. I'm stating. I know about Florida. I know about the Ponzi scheme. I know about the people you ruined, and I know you're trying to do the same thing to me. He stood there speechless for a moment. Then he forced a smile. Mrs. Parker, you've been misinformed, I can assure you. Get out, I said, my voice cold as ice. Get out of my house and don't you ever come back. He stammered, tried to protest, but I just pointed to the door. He grabbed his briefcase and practically ran out, leaving the revised contract on my coffee table. As soon as he was gone, I slammed the door shut and locked it. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Mary Sue. How far will Charles go to swindle Helen?
"Well, fiddle-dee-dee," I said, trying to sound as dithery as possible, and beckoned him to the porch. The sun was hitting it just right, making the floral cushions on my rocking chairs look even more cheerful than they actually were. "Come on out here, Charles. The light's ever so much better, and the birds are singing. Aren't they just precious?" He hesitated a moment, his eyes flicking towards the street, probably wondering if anyone was watching. Smart man, that Charles. Shame he was such a crook. "Now, you were saying something about—" I trailed off, pursing my lips and tapping a finger against my chin. "Oh dear, what was it? My memory isn't what it used to be, you know. Ever since, well, never you mind. It's probably the Aricept I'm taking. Seems like every other commercial on CNN is about drugs these days." Charles managed a strained smile, perching himself on the edge of one of the rocking chairs like he was afraid it might bite. "I was just explaining the potential returns, Mrs. Parker. Quite substantial, in fact. Truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." I fluttered my eyelashes at him, the old Southern Belle routine. "Oh, returns. You know, my Harold was always talking about returns. Used to say he was getting a good return on his investments. Of course, Harold always did have a way with money. Built up quite a nest egg, he did." I paused for effect, letting my gaze drift towards the rose bushes I'd spent the morning deadheading. He left me very comfortable, Charles. Very comfortable indeed. Though, bless his heart, he wasn't the best at explaining things. Just handed me a checkbook and said, "Helen, you take care of it." And I have. Been managing just fine, thank you very much. I launched into a monologue about my late husband's financial acumen, or lack thereof, making sure to mention the phrase substantial inheritance at least 3 times. I even threw in a bit about his lucky streak at the dog races back in the day, just to add a touch of folksy charm. He never went to the dog races. Harold preferred a good round of golf with the boys every Saturday. "Of course," I continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I'm not exactly an expert, you understand? Numbers were always Harold's domain. But I do know a good thing when I see it. And, well, I like nice things. Always have." Just then, a horrendous racket erupted from next door. Jerry, bless his heart, had decided it was the perfect time to pressure wash his driveway. The high-pitched whine of the machine drowned out my voice, and I saw Charles wince. "Oh dear, that Jerry is always making such a fuss. He's retired now, you know, says he has to keep busy, but sometimes I think he just likes to make noise." He leaned closer, his eyes gleaming with renewed interest. "As I was saying, Mrs. Parker, the opportunity to invest in this particular venture is time-sensitive." He raised his voice to compete with Jerry's machine. "We need to finalize commitments quickly to secure the best possible returns." I pretended to struggle to hear him, cupping my hand to my ear. "What was that, dear? Something about returns and commitments? Oh my goodness, it's so noisy out here. Maybe we should go back inside." No, Mrs. Parker, this is fine," he insisted, his voice tight with impatience. "The returns are exceptional, truly. And the commitment, well, the sooner you commit, the better the returns." He was practically shouting now. Jerry was really going to town on that driveway. I chuckled, a low, throaty sound. "Oh, you young bucks are always in such a hurry. Back in my day, we took our time with things, didn't rush into anything. But I suppose times have changed." I gave him a knowing look. "Now, about this commitment, what exactly would that entail, and how would I get my money to you? I'm not very good with these newfangled apps, you know. I still prefer writing a check. Wells Fargo, of course, been with them for years."
He leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, despite the noise. "We can handle the transfer any way you prefer, Mrs. Parker. Check, wire transfer, whatever is most convenient for you. As for the commitment, well, let's just say it's an investment in your future. A secure future with substantial returns. A future where you can continue to enjoy those nice things you mentioned." The pressure washer suddenly sputtered and died. Jerry probably ran out of gas. The silence that descended was almost deafening. Charles looked like a coiled spring, waiting for my answer. I smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that could curdle milk. "Oh, Charles, you're such a dear. I think I might just be interested after all. But before I make any decisions, I need to ask my daughter, Sarah. She works down in the Fulton County District Attorney's office, and she always has my best interest at heart." He paled. "The District Attorney's office?" Will Charles take the bait and reveal his true intentions?
"Well, bless his heart," I said, watching his face drain of color. "No need to look so worried, Charles. Sarah's just looking out for her mama. Besides, she's got a head for numbers, just like her old man." I paused, letting that sink in. He was a fine accountant, Harold was, before the Alzheimer's took him. I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue, a little bit of real sadness mixed in with the act. Then, my cell phone, the blasted iPhone Sarah got me, started ringing. "Excuse me, Charles," I said, holding up a finger. "That'll be my Bethany, the sweetest girl." I answered, putting it on speaker. "Bethany, honey, how are you?" "Mrs. Parker, so glad I caught you. I wanted to follow up on our conversation. Are you ready to seize this incredible opportunity?" Her voice dripped with that fake enthusiasm that only used car salesmen and people trying to scam you seem to master. "Well, Bethany, Charles here was just telling me all about it. It sounds promising. But, a girl can't be too careful, especially on a fixed income." I glanced at Charles, who was now sweating despite the air conditioning. He dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. "Of course, Mrs. Parker, completely understand, but we have a few other investors vying for a spot, and we wouldn't want you to miss out. A small initial investment would secure your place, and then we can finalize the paperwork later." "A small investment, you say?" I repeated, drawing out the words. "How small are we talking, sweetie?" "Just $5,000, Mrs. Parker. A drop in the bucket compared to the returns you'll see." I hummed thoughtfully. $5,000. Well, now, that's a good chunk of change for a little old lady like me. Let me think. Bethany, I am interested, but I am old school. I don't do any of that fancy Zelle or Venmo nonsense. I like to see things on paper. I like to use my checkbook." Charles perked up, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes. Bethany, however, sounded less than thrilled. "A check, Mrs. Parker? We prefer electronic transfers for speed and efficiency." "Efficiency? Schmefficiency?" I scoffed. "Back in my day, we trusted checks. They leave a paper trail. Besides, my arthritis is acting up something fierce today. Fumbling with those little numbers on the computer screen sounds like a nightmare. So, if I'm going to invest, it'll be with a check." "Well, I suppose we could make an exception, Mrs. Parker," Bethany conceded, her voice tight. "But we'd need it as soon as possible to secure your spot." "No problem, honey," I said, smiling sweetly. "I can write one out right now. Who should I make it payable to?" Charles leaned forward eagerly. "Make it payable to Sure Investments, LLC." "Sure Investments," I repeated, nodding slowly. "All right, Charles, I'll do just that." I reached for my checkbook, which was tucked away in my purse. As I flipped through the checks, I subtly pressed a button on my iPhone. It was a shortcut I'd set up to send a text to the fraud department at Wells Fargo. The message was simple: flag check to Sure Investments, LLC. Possible scam.
I wrote out the check, carefully filling in the details. There you go, Charles, $5,000. A leap of faith, I tell you, but I'm trusting you to make it worth my while. He took the check with trembling hands, his eyes gleaming. You won't regret this, Mrs. Parker, I guarantee it. I certainly hope not, I said, my voice hardening slightly, because if I do, honey, you'll be hearing from my Sarah, and believe me, you don't want to cross her. After they left, I sat there sipping my Earl Grey, the aroma filling the air. I felt a strange mix of emotions, satisfaction, anxiety, and a touch of sadness. Harold always did say I was a good actress. Later that evening, I was watching Jeopardy when my phone buzzed again. It was a notification from Wells Fargo. Check flagged, transaction under review. Damn, I thought I had it all figured out. But had I been too obvious? Had Bethany or Charles suspected my little game? Was my carefully laid plan about to fall apart before it even began? Or even worse, was my bank going to screw it all up with their incompetence? Is my plan foolproof? Well, ain't that a kick in the teeth, I muttered to myself, staring at the Wells Fargo notification. Transaction under review. What in tarnation did that mean? I envisioned some fresh-faced kid, barely old enough to shave, sitting in a cubicle, deciding whether or not my hard-earned money was worth protecting. Probably too busy playing solitaire on their computer to notice a blatant scam staring them in the face. Honestly, the incompetence of some of these institutions just boils my blood. The phone rang, startling me. It was Wells Fargo. I took a deep breath and answered. Helen Parker speaking? Mrs. Parker, this is David from the fraud department. We're calling regarding the check you wrote to Sure Investments, LLC. Yes, David, that's why I flagged it, remember? I suspected fraud. I tried to keep the exasperation out of my voice. Right. We appreciate you doing that, Mrs. Parker. We wanted to let you know that Sure Investments attempted to deposit the check earlier today. And? I prompted, tapping my foot impatiently. And they attempted to deposit it into a newly opened account under the name Sunrise Ventures, David said. I almost choked on my own spit. Sunrise Ventures? You mean they didn't even have the decency to use the same damn name? That's it, isn't it? That's all the proof I need, sweetie. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a hot, righteous anger bubbling up inside me. I had them. I had these two-bit grifters dead to rights. We agree, Mrs. Parker. The transaction has been blocked, and we're filing a report with the authorities. Good, you do that, because I intend to press charges myself. I want those vultures behind bars, David. We understand, Mrs. Parker. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation. I hung up the phone, a grim smile spreading across my face. Oh, they were going to regret messing with Helen Parker. They thought they could take advantage of a little old lady, did they? Well, they were about to learn a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a woman with a sharp mind and a healthy dose of skepticism. I poured myself another cup of Earl Grey, adding a generous splash of milk. The aroma was soothing, but it couldn't quite calm the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to confront Bethany and Charles. I wanted to see the look on their faces when they realized their little scheme had been exposed. Just as I was about to call Sarah and tell her the good news, there was a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could that be? I peeked through the peephole, and my blood ran cold. It was them, Bethany and Charles. Bethany was beaming, her perfectly white teeth flashing. Charles, as always, looked like he was trying to sell me something, even standing on my porch. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Well, hello again, I said, forcing a smile. What brings you two back? Mrs. Parker, Bethany said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We just wanted to drop by and thank you again for your generous investment. Charles here has some final paperwork for you to sign, just a formality, of course. Charles stepped forward, holding a clipboard with a stack of papers. It's just a final investment agreement, Mrs. Parker. Standard procedure. It outlines the terms and conditions of your investment. A formality, huh? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. You guess this formality gives you permission to gamble away my entire fixed income. Bethany's smile faltered slightly. Of course not, Mrs. Parker. This is simply to protect both of us. Protect both of us. Honey, the only person who needs protecting here is me from the likes of you two. You think I'm some senile old woman who doesn't know which way is up? You think you can just waltz in here, spin your little fairy tales and steal my money? Charles's face flushed a deep red. Mrs. Parker, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, I snapped, my voice rising. I know all about Sunrise Ventures, Charles. I know about the new account you opened, and I know that Wells Fargo has flagged your little scheme and reported it to the authorities. Bethany gasped, her eyes wide with panic. Charles's hand trembled as he clutched the clipboard. You're bluffing, Charles stammered. Am I retorted, stepping closer to him. Why don't you try depositing that check and see what happens? Go on, Charles. Make my day. He didn't move. I want you two off my property, I said, my voice shaking with rage. And if I ever see either of you again, I promise you, you'll regret it. They stood there for a moment, frozen in shock. Then slowly, Charles lowered the clipboard and Bethany took his arm. They turned and walked back to their shiny black car, their shoulders slumped in defeat. As I watched them drive away, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me feeling drained and vulnerable. Had I gone too far? Had I revealed too much? They knew I was onto them. They knew I had contacted the bank. What were they going to do now? Were they going to try to disappear with whatever money they had already scammed, or were they going to come after me? I suddenly remembered the stack of papers Charles was holding, the final investment agreement. What if there was something in those papers that could incriminate me? Something that could make it look like I was involved in their scheme? I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. Had I been so focused on catching them in the act that I had overlooked something crucial? Had I played my hand too soon? Is Helen about to be exposed?
Lord have mercy. I felt like I'd aged 10 years watching that shiny black car disappear down my drive. The silence in the house was deafening. I needed to think, and think fast. That's when I saw it. The final investment agreement Charles had dropped in his haste. I snatched it up, my hands trembling despite myself. Time to see just how deep in the mire I was. All right, Helen, play the game, I muttered, heading into the kitchen. Earl Grey time. That's what I needed. With the kettle whistling its shrill tune, I smoothed the document out on my kitchen table. The smell of lemon verbena from my window box was a small comfort as I began to read. Page after page of legal jargon swam before my eyes. My arthritis was acting up too, making it difficult to grip the pages. Damn it all anyway. Okay, focus, Helen, I told myself, grabbing my reading glasses. You used to eat this stuff for breakfast, just like balancing my checkbook. And then I saw it, buried in the fine print, a paragraph that made my blood run cold. Agreement is entered into freely and without coercion. All parties acknowledge that projections of potential returns are hypothetical scenarios and should not be construed as guarantees of future financial performance. Hypothetical scenarios? The lying snakes? That's when I formulated a plan. A risky one, to be sure. But what choice did I have? I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and marched into the living room, grabbing my iPhone off the side table. It was time for Act 2 of my little old lady performance. I dialed Charles's number. Charles, sweetie, I've been thinking, all night in fact. I don't want to miss out on this amazing opportunity. I'm ready to sign. I could practically hear the smug grins spreading across his face. Mrs. Parker, that's wonderful news, he gushed. Bethany and I will be right over. Oh, no rush, honey, I cooed. I'll be here, just puttering around. Puttering around my foot. I was setting a trap. They arrived an hour later, practically bouncing with excitement.
Bethany was wearing an even brighter shade of lipstick, and Charles's suit looked like it had just been pressed. They reeked of cologne and desperation. "Mrs. Parker, so glad you've reconsidered," Charles exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with dollar signs. "Yes, dear," Bethany chimed in. "This is going to be so wonderful for you. Think of the returns." "Oh, I am, sweetie. I certainly am." I gave them my best fluttery eyelash look. "Now where do I sign?" Charles practically shoved the agreement and a pen into my hands. I pretended to squint at the document, making a show of how difficult it was for me to see. Slowly, painstakingly, I signed my name. "There you go, darling," I said, handing the pen back to Charles. "All done." They beamed at each other, practically vibrating with glee. "Wonderful, absolutely wonderful," Charles crowed. "We'll get this processed right away, Mrs. Parker. You've made a very wise decision." "Oh, I think so too," I said, a wicked glint in my eye. They started gathering their things, practically tripping over themselves in their eagerness to leave with my signed agreement. That's when I made my move. "Oh, just one more thing, dears," I said, my voice suddenly steely. They froze, their smiles faltering. "Before you go," I continued, raising my wrist, "I thought you might like to hear this." With a flourish, I pressed play on my Apple Watch. The room filled with their voices, clear as a bell. Their promises of guaranteed returns, their condensing assurances, their blatant lies, all captured on tape. Charles's face went white. Bethany gasped. What is this?" Charles stammered. I stood up straight, my back ramrod straight, every inch of my 72 years radiating fury. "This, you two-bit hustlers, is your downfall. This is proof of your fraudulent scheme. This is going straight to the district attorney." I waited for their reaction, for the fear to bloom in their eyes. Instead, Charles threw back his head and laughed. Bethany joined in, their laughter echoing through the room, cold and mocking. "You think that's gonna stop us, Mrs. Parker? That's adorable," Charles said, wiping a tear from his eye. "Read the contract, darling," Bethany said, still chuckling. "It's all there. Hypothetical scenarios, projections. We're covered, airtight." Charles snapped his fingers. "You can't prove a thing, sweetheart. It's all just talk." The laughter felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at them, speechless, as the reality of their words sunk in. I had been so sure I had them, so confident in my trap. But had I just played right into their hands? Had my clever plan just given them the green light to proceed, knowing they were untouchable? Had I just signed away my life savings, all while giving them the satisfaction of knowing they had outsmarted me? Oh, damn it. Had my trap backfired? Damn it all to hell, was I truly that naive? I felt the blood drain from my face. My carefully constructed plan, the hours of research, the discomfort of playing the doddering old fool, all for naught? The smug looks on their faces, it was unbearable. But I wasn't beaten yet. "Don't get too cocky, kids," I said, my voice regaining some of its steel. "I may be a little old lady on a fixed income, but I'm not stupid. While you two were busy patting yourselves on the back, I made a little phone call of my own." Charles's smug grin faltered just a hair. Bethany's perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed. "Oh, and who did you call, sweetie?" Charles sneered. "Actually, I called the district attorney. And oh yes, I also dropped a line to the nice folks at Wells Fargo. Funny thing, fraud alerts, they take them very seriously, especially when it involves the life savings of a senior citizen. They've frozen your little account, I imagine." The color completely drained from Bethany's face this time. She shot a panicked look at Charles. You wouldn't," she stammered. "Oh, honey, don't underestimate me. I may look like I spend my days knitting and drinking Earl Grey, which incidentally I do, but I also know how to protect myself. Back in my day, we didn't have all these fancy computers. We balanced our checkbooks to the penny, and we sure as hell didn't let anyone pull a fast one on us." Charles's laughter had vanished. He looked like a cornered rat. That's a bluff. They wouldn't freeze the account on your word alone." I smiled, a genuine, albeit slightly wicked smile. "Wouldn't they? You'd be surprised how persuasive a sweet old lady can be when she's telling a story about being swindled out of her life savings, especially when she mentions the word elder abuse a few times." Bethany's eyes narrowed. She pulled her iPhone out of her designer handbag, her fingers flying across the screen. After a moment, her face contorted in rage. "You bitch," she shrieked. "They did freeze it. I can't access a damn thing." Charles grabbed his own phone, confirming Bethany's discovery. His face was a mask of fury. "You've just made a very big mistake, Mrs. Parker. A very big mistake." I braced myself, expecting some kind of outburst. I even considered grabbing the heavy glass vase on the coffee table. But what happened next was something I never could have anticipated. Bethany reached into her purse again, pulling out a document. It looked official, with seals and signatures. My heart started to pound. What was this? "You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've outsmarted us? Well, think again, Helen." She spat my name like it was poison. She held up the document, waving it in the air like a trophy. Charles moved closer, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Remember those harmless forms we had you sign, sweetheart? The ones about, what was it? Managing your affairs should you become incapacitated? You know, in case your arthritis got too bad, or you had one too many sips of that Earl Grey and fell down the stairs." My stomach churned. I remembered the forms. They were part of the pile of documents they'd presented to me. The print was small, the language dense and full of legal jargon. I'd skimmed them, trusting, foolishly, that they were simply routine paperwork. The phantom factor document. Well, one of those little forms, darling, was a power of attorney. And guess who you granted it to? Me! She thrust the document toward me, the words "power of attorney" emblazoned across the top in bold letters. I stared at the paper, my vision blurring. It couldn't be. I would never. But there it was, my signature, clear as day. "It's all perfectly legal," Charles said, his voice regaining his smooth, oily tone. "Bethany now has complete control of your assets, Mrs. Parker. Your house, your bank accounts, your investments, everything." Bethany's laughter filled the room once more, even more chilling than before. "Thank you for playing, Helen. It's been educational. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have some paperwork to do. And by paperwork, I mean transferring all your assets into our names." They stood there, Charles and Bethany, young and arrogant, their faces alight with triumph. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. My carefully constructed trap had not only backfired, it had given them the ultimate weapon. They had legal control of everything I owned. Had I just lost everything?
"God almighty," I muttered, more to myself than anyone. It was happening, right there, in that sterile courtroom, with the smell of old wood and legal anxiety hanging in the air thicker than Atlanta humidity in August. The judge, a woman who looked like she hadn't cracked a smile since law school, peered down at me over her glasses. "Mrs. Parker," she said, her voice echoing slightly, "are you contesting the validity of this document?" I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. My lawyer, bless his heart, young Mr. Abernathy, fresh out of Emory, stood beside me, looking ashen. He'd tried his best, but those slick devils had covered their tracks well. "I am, Your Honor," I said, trying to project a confidence I definitely wasn't feeling. "I would never knowingly sign a power of attorney granting those vultures control of my life savings." Bethany, the she-devil herself, smirked from across the room. Charles, looking smugger than a cat who'd swallowed a canary, stood beside her.
They were dressed impeccably. Bethany in a power suit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, and Charles in a tailored suit that screamed, "Trust fund, baby." Mr. Abernathy stepped forward. "Your Honor, we contend that Mrs. Parker was manipulated, that the circumstances surrounding the signing of this document were dubious, to say the least. We believe undue influence was exerted." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Abernathy, do you have any evidence to support these claims? Any witnesses? Anything beyond Mrs. Parker's assertion that she didn't understand what she was signing?" That was the crux of it, wasn't it? My word against theirs. And they had a piece of paper with my signature on it. "We've explored the possibility of forgery, Your Honor," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice strained. "But the handwriting expert couldn't definitively prove that it wasn't Mrs. Parker's signature. It's too close to call. The microscopic analysis shows variations, but nothing conclusive." Damn it all. I'd hoped against hope that we could prove the signature was a fake. That would have blown the whole thing wide open. But no such luck. Bethany's lawyer, a shark in a perfectly pressed suit, rose to his feet. He looked at me with a condescending smile, like I was some doddering old fool who'd wandered into the wrong room. "Your Honor, Mrs. Parker is a mature woman. It's understandable that her memory might be unreliable, but the document speaks for itself. It's clearly signed, witnessed, and notarized. There's no evidence of coercion or fraud." He then had the audacity to turn to me, his voice dripping with false concern. "Mrs. Parker, are you saying you don't remember signing this document? Perhaps your arthritis medication is affecting your memory." The gall of that man. I wanted to slap him silly. "I remember signing a stack of papers, sweetie, presented to me by those two con artists as part of their sure thing investment opportunity. I remember being rushed, being told it was just routine paperwork, but I sure as hell don't remember signing away my entire life." My voice was shaking now, anger and fear mixing together in a toxic cocktail. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on me. I saw a few sympathetic faces, but mostly just curiosity. The judge sighed. "Mrs. Parker, I understand your distress, but the law requires more than just a feeling that something isn't right. We need concrete evidence." She turned back to Mr. Abernathy. "Mr. Abernathy, do you have anything further to present?" He looked at me, his young face etched with worry. I could see the unspoken words in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker. I've done everything I can." He cleared his throat. "No, Your Honor, not at this time." The judge nodded, a look of finality on her face. "In that case," she said, her voice resonating through the courtroom, "I'm inclined to rule in favor of the defendants. The power of attorney appears to be valid, and there's insufficient evidence to suggest otherwise." My heart sank. It was over. They'd won. I'd been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and left with nothing but the clothes on my back and the bitter taste of regret in my mouth. The phantom factor, that stupid little detail I'd dismissed, the one I thought was just boring small print, had been the key to my undoing. Then Bethany, never one to miss an opportunity to twist the knife, stood up. "Your Honor," she said, her voice dripping with insincere sweetness, "we understand that this is a difficult time for Mrs. Parker. We're willing to allow her to remain in her home for a reasonable period, say 30 days. After that, of course, we'll need to put the property on the market." 30 days. 30 days to pack up my life, to say goodbye to the house I'd lived in for 40 years, to figure out where I was going to go, how I was going to survive. I looked around the courtroom, my vision blurring with tears. Was this it? Was this how it all ended? With me, a 72-year-old widow being tossed out on the street by a pair of heartless grifters? Mr. Abernathy put a hand on my arm, his touch gentle and reassuring. He said quietly, "We can appeal, Mrs. Parker. We still have options." But did we really? I looked at the smug faces of Charles and Bethany, at the judge's weary expression, and the stack of legal documents that seemed to hold my fate in their pages. Hope, that fragile little thing, seemed to flicker and die within me. Had my carefully constructed trap not only backfired, but also become the instrument of my own destruction? Was all hope truly lost?
Oh, for the love of Pete, I muttered under my breath, staring at the worn floor tiles of that sterile courtroom. They looked like they hadn't been cleaned since Eisenhower was in office. Then Bethany's lawyer, that slick-haired young buck, decided to pour salt in the wound. He stood up, smoothed his expensive suit, and addressed the judge with a voice dripping with condescension. "Your Honor," he began, "while we sympathize with Mrs. Parker's predicament, we must point out a certain pattern of behavior, a pattern that suggests a lack of mental acuity." I kept my gaze fixed on the floor, letting my shoulders slump a little more. Let them think they'd broken me. Let them think they'd won. "Mrs. Parker," he continued, and I could practically feel his gaze boring into me, "has repeatedly demonstrated a, shall we say, selective memory. She claims to have understood the terms of the agreement, yet she conveniently forgot about key clauses, such as the clauses that protected our clients from this very situation. This wasn't some oversight, Your Honor. It was a deliberate attempt to obfuscate." Obfuscate? The nerve of that whippersnapper! Back in my day, we called that lying. He went on, his voice rising in indignation. "Furthermore, Mrs. Parker seems to have a difficult time keeping track of details. She misremembered meeting times, overlooked crucial documents, and generally acted in a manner consistent with, well, Your Honor, I'm loath to say it, but with someone who isn't quite all there." I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I forced myself to remain still, to keep my eyes downcast. He was trying to paint me as a senile old woman, easily manipulated, incapable of understanding complex financial transactions. And the worst part? It was working. Judge Thompson, a man who looked like he hadn't had a good night's sleep since he'd taken the bench, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Mrs. Parker," he said, his voice laced with concern, "Mr. Davis raises a valid point. Your testimony has been inconsistent at times. Are you certain you fully understood the implications of your investment?" He paused, giving me a chance to respond, but I just kept staring at the floor. The truth was, I had understood every single damn detail. The phantom factor, that little paragraph about potential liability, the one that I had dismissed as boilerplate, was now hanging over me like a guillotine. I had understood it, but I had underestimated its potential impact. I had been so focused on the potential gain, so confident in my ability to outsmart them, that I'd let my guard down. "Mrs. Parker," the judge prompted again, his voice growing sharper, "are you able to answer my question?" Still, I said nothing. Let them think I was a doddering old fool, let them underestimate me. It was all part of the plan, or at least it had been part of the plan. Now I wasn't so sure. Abernathy squeezed my arm gently, urging me to speak, but I shook my head slightly. What was the point?
They had me cornered. They had the law on their side, and they had managed to convince the judge that I was mentally incompetent. It was a brilliant strategy, really. By discrediting my testimony, they were effectively silencing me. The judge sighed, a weary sound that seemed to fill the entire courtroom. "Mr. Abernathy," he said, "I'm beginning to have serious concerns about Mrs. Parker's capacity to understand these proceedings. Given her apparent confusion, I'm not sure I can rely on her testimony." He paused, and I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. I may need to appoint a guardian ad litem to represent her interests. A guardian ad litem. Someone to make decisions for me because I was no longer deemed capable of making them for myself. It was the ultimate humiliation. To be stripped of my autonomy, to be treated like a child. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision even further. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to regain control, but it was no use. I was losing. I was losing everything. My house, my savings, my reputation, and now, potentially, my freedom. I could hear Bethany and Charles whispering to each other, their voices hushed but triumphant. They thought they had won. They thought they had outsmarted me. And maybe, just maybe, they had. "Sweetie," Bethany said, loud enough for me to hear, "looks like Grandma needs a nap." Damn her hide. The courtroom air felt thick and suffocating. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a relentless, irritating drone. I stared blankly at the floor, feeling numb, defeated. Was this it? Was this the end of the line? Had my elaborate scheme, my carefully constructed trap, not only failed but also become the instrument of my own destruction? Can I possibly recover from this devastating blow? Damn it all! I could feel the judge's gaze on me, the kind of gaze that says, "I've seen enough and I'm about to rule." He adjusted his glasses, that little tick he had when he was about to deliver bad news. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent courtroom. In light of Mrs. Parker's apparent distress and the concerns raised about her capacity, I am inclined to what? Throw me to the wolves? Let those two vipers, Bethany and Charles, slither away with my life savings? The injustice of it all was a bitter pill, a jagged shard of glass lodged in my throat. Bethany smirked at me, a saccharine, condescending smile that made my blood boil. Charles, ever the smarmy one, patted her hand, a picture of concerned benevolence. They were practically giddy, the vultures circling, waiting for me to breathe my last. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable. I could practically hear the gavel coming down, sealing my fate. My carefully laid plans, my weeks of meticulous preparation, all for naught. I had underestimated them. Their ruthlessness, their willingness to stoop to any level to get what they wanted. The judge took a breath, ready to speak. I am inclined to... Suddenly, a voice boomed from the back of the courtroom. "Excuse me, Your Honor, I have something to say." Everyone turned, necks craning, to see who dared interrupt the proceedings. It was Jerry frickin' Abernathy, my noisy neighbor, the one with the leaf blower at 7 a.m. on Sundays, the one who always wanted to borrow my hedge trimmer and never returned it on time. Jerry! He was standing there, in all his glory, wearing that ridiculous Hawaiian shirt he seemed to live in, his face flushed and animated. The bailiff, a burly man with a permanent frown, was trying to block his path, but Jerry was having none of it. "I insist. I have information pertinent to this case," Jerry declared, his voice echoing through the room. The judge looked bewildered, his eyebrows shooting up towards his hairline. "Mr. Abernathy," he said, his voice laced with irritation, This is highly irregular. Are you on the witness list?" "No, sir, I am not," Jerry admitted, but he didn't back down. "But I know things, important things, about Mrs. Parker and those people." He gestured dramatically towards Bethany and Charles, his face contorted in a scowl. Bethany and Charles exchanged nervous glances. Their smug grins had vanished, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Good. Let them sweat." The judge sighed, a long, weary sound. "Mr. Abernathy, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm afraid I cannot allow you to disrupt these proceedings. Unless you have something truly relevant to offer, I must ask you to leave." "Relevant? Relevant?" Jerry sputtered, his voice rising in indignation. "Your Honor, this is about more than just money. This is about doing what's right." He puffed out his chest, looking like a rooster ready for a fight. I stared at Jerry, my mind racing. What could he possibly know? He wasn't privy to any of my plans. He didn't know about the fake dementia, the hidden assets, or the carefully orchestrated charade. All he knew was that I was an old lady who occasionally complained about his loud music and overflowing recycling bins. Bethany leaned over and whispered something to Charles, her voice barely audible but undoubtedly laced with venom. Charles nodded, his eyes narrowed, and gestured subtly to one of the lawyers. The lawyer, a young buck with an expensive suit and a predatory gleam in his eye, rose to his feet. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "I object to this spectacle. Mr. Abernathy is clearly not a qualified witness, and his testimony would be nothing more than hearsay. I move that he be removed from the courtroom immediately." The judge hesitated, his gaze shifting between Jerry, the lawyer, and me. He looked utterly exasperated, like he wanted nothing more than to bang his gavel and declare a mistrial. "Mr. Abernathy," he said wearily, "do you have any specific evidence to present? Anything that directly relates to the allegations of financial exploitation against Mrs. Parker?" Jerry puffed out his cheeks, considering. He scratched his chin, his brow furrowed in concentration. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as everyone waited with bated breath. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but clear. "Well, Your Honor, it all started a few months back when I noticed some fellas hanging around Mrs. Parker's property, taking pictures, measuring, and generally acting shifty. At first, I thought they were with the city, maybe doing some kind of survey. You know, they had those funny-looking sticks they use to measure the elevation." He paused for a breath. "But then I saw them talking to that Charles fellow, the one right there, and they were showing him maps of the land. That's when I knew something was up. I've seen enough episodes of Matlock to know that's never a good sign." My head snapped up. This changes everything. Had someone been snooping around the back 40 acres? The phantom factor rears its ugly head after all. And Jerry saw them? The judge raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Bethany and Charles looked like they were about to have a collective coronane. Jerry continued, his voice gaining momentum. "Then one day I was out walking my dog, Buster. He's a Jack Russell, real sweet, but a bit of a barker. You know how it is. And I overheard Charles talking on his cell phone. He was saying something about cutting corners and getting the deal done before the old bat figures it out." He paused, looking directly at me. "No offense, Mrs. Parker." I managed a weak smile. "None taken, Jerry." "Anyway," Jerry continued, "I didn't think much of it at the time, but then when I saw Mrs. Parker looking so distressed in court today, it all clicked into place. Those fellas, the maps, the phone call, it all pointed to something fishy." He took a deep breath, his eyes gleaming with conviction. "Your Honor, I believe those two are trying to pull a fast one on Mrs. Parker, and I'm not going to stand for it." The courtroom erupted in a buzz of murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, struggling to restore order. Bethany and Charles were practically sputtering with rage, their faces a mask of fury. Me? I just sat there, stunned, a tiny spark of hope flickering in my chest. Could Jerry, my noisy, nosy neighbor, actually be my savior? What does Jerry possibly know?
Well, I'll be, I muttered under my breath, my eyes glued to Jerry. What in tarnation could he possibly know? Jerry, bless his cotton socks, puffed out his chest and addressed the judge again. Your Honor, he began, I might have something that could shed some light on this situation. You see, we've had a bit of a situation with petty theft in the neighborhood lately. Nothing major, mind you, mostly teenagers swiping garden gnomes and whatnot, but it rattled the wives group. So I invested in a little security system. Nothing fancy, mind you, just a few cameras around the perimeter of my property. He paused, reaching into a worn leather briefcase. And as it happens, one of those cameras, well, it caught a few interesting things leading up to Mrs. Parker's situation with Bethany and Charles. Bethany and Charles exchanged a panicked glance that could curdle milk. I swear I could practically smell the cheap hairspray Bethany used from across the room, mixed with the faint scent of Charles's aftershave, something that smelled suspiciously like desperation. Jerry pulled out a USB drive with a flourish. I took the liberty of bringing the relevant footage. It's not exactly Spielberg quality, but it's clear enough. Shows the comings and goings around Mrs. Parker's place. He winked at me. Figured it might be helpful. The judge, a woman who looked like she hadn't smiled since law school, nodded curtly. Mr. Thompson, if you please. The bailiff, a burly man who looked like he could bench press a small car, took the USB drive and plugged it into the court system. A grainy black and white video flickered to life on the courtroom's large screen. It was a view of my back porch, the one that looked out over the admittedly overgrown rose bushes. The quality was, shall we say, less than stellar. You could barely make out the details. Now, Your Honor, Jerry's voice boomed through the courtroom, if you'll direct your attention to the dates on the lower right-hand corner, these recordings are from the 2 weeks leading up to the supposed signing of that power of attorney document. The video showed a series of figures approaching my back door. At first, it was just me, shuffling around with my gardening gloves and my trusty trowel. Then, Bethany appeared. Notice anything, folks? Jerry prompted, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. Miss Bethany seems to be paying Mrs. Parker an awful lot of visits for someone who claims to have barely known her. And just so you know, my cameras also pick up sound, muffled, but there. The video continued, and as it did, a horrifying realization dawned on me. The footage showed Bethany practically dragging me onto the porch day after day. She'd prop me up in a chair, place a glass of water in my hand, and then she'd start talking. Even with the muffled audio, I could see her lips moving, her hands gesturing animatedly. It was like watching a play, a very bad play, unfold in slow motion. She seemed to be saying the same phrases over and over again. The phantom factor reared its ugly head. Again. Just want what's best for Helen. Difficult for her to manage things on her own. Family is the most important thing. My stomach churned. She was coaching me. She was rehearsing me like some kind of puppet on a string. And I, the gullible fool, had fallen for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Charles, meanwhile, was fidgeting like a toddler who needed a potty break. Bethany was trying to maintain a facade of composure, but I could see the sweat beading on her forehead. Honey, you are busted. The video continued, showing Bethany's increasingly frantic attempts to get me to repeat her lines. Sometimes I'd just stare blankly, my mind a fog of confusion and pain. Other times I'd mumble something incoherent, a jumble of words that made no sense. And each time Bethany would grow more and more exasperated. Finally, the video cut to the day of the supposed signing. Bethany practically shoved me into the chair, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness. Charles stood behind her, his eyes darting nervously around the porch. It was all so clear now, so painfully obvious. As you can see, Your Honor, Jerry declared, his voice triumphant, Mrs. Parker was not exactly in a state to make informed decisions. She was clearly being influenced, shall we say,
by Miss Bethany. The judge leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Mr. Thompson, is this all you have? Jerry nodded. It's not crystal clear, Your Honor. The sound is muffled and the picture is grainy, but I believe it paints a pretty clear picture of what was going on here. The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on the judge. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of hope and fear. The video, as grainy and imperfect as it was, had exposed Bethany and Charles for the vultures they were. But was it enough? Would the judge see through their lies? Or would I lose everything, all because I was too trusting, too vulnerable, too damn old? Is the video evidence enough to sway the judge?
Well, I'll be, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. My heart was doing the jitterbug, a nervous little dance that threatened to shake me right out of my sensible shoes. Then Jerry cleared his throat, a small smile playing on his lips. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady and confident. I apologize for the unconventional methods I employed in gathering this evidence. I know my leaf blowing hasn't made me popular with Mrs. Parker here. He gave me a quick, apologetic glance, but I assure you, it served a purpose. A murmur went through the courtroom. Even I was confused. What on earth did his leaf blowing have to do with anything? I remembered how it drove me nuts. Every Tuesday morning, like clockwork, the droning whine of that machine, right outside my window. Jerry continued, while my hobby may seem like nothing more than a nuisance, I assure you it's a bit more complex than that. You see, I'm also a sound engineer. I have a fully equipped studio in my garage, and I just happen to be rather adept at audio processing. He paused for effect, and I swear you could hear a pin drop. Even Charles and Bethany looked momentarily bewildered. I took the liberty, Jerry continued, of enhancing the audio from Mrs. Parker's security camera footage. The original audio was, as we've seen, quite poor, but with the right equipment and techniques, one can extract a surprising amount of detail. And what I found, Your Honor, was enlightening. He clicked a button on his laptop, and the video on the screen flickered. This time, though, the audio was different, sharper, clearer. It was still grainy, but the voices, they were distinct. Suddenly, Bethany's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating. Remember, Helen, you have to act confused, mumble a little, look vague, think dementia. Got it? My breath caught in my throat. The blood drained from my face. I remembered those days. The confusion, the pressure, the feeling of being manipulated. But hearing it now, like this, laid bare for everyone to see, it was sickening. Then came my voice, hesitant and uncertain. I don't know, Bethany. This doesn't feel right. Nonsense, Helen, Bethany snapped. It's for your own good. Charles and I are just looking out for you. Now, repeat after me. I, Helen Parker, being of sound mind and body, but I'm not of sound mind. I'm confused. I'm tired. Just say the damn words, Helen, Bethany hissed, her voice laced with impatience. We're almost done. Think of all the good this will do. New windows, a new roof. Just cooperate. The video continued, revealing Bethany coaching me, drilling me, forcing me to say things I didn't understand. And then, the moment of the signing, Charles standing behind Bethany, his face pale and sweaty, Bethany's hand practically guiding mine as I signed the power of attorney. But the most damning part was yet to come. And what about the money, Bethany? I heard myself ask, my voice weak and trembling. What happens if I need it? Bethany's response sent a shiver down my spine.
"Don't worry your pretty little head about that, Helen," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Charles and I will take care of everything. You just relax and enjoy your golden years. Besides," she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "by the time you figure out what's going on, you won't remember anyway." The courtroom erupted. Gasps of shock and outrage filled the air. Even the court reporter looked up from her stenography machine, her eyes wide. Charles and Bethany were ashen-faced, their carefully constructed facade crumbling before my very eyes. Jerry clicked the video off. The silence that followed was deafening. The judge, her face grim, turned to Charles and Bethany. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" she asked, her voice icy. Charles stammered, "Your Honor, we can explain." Bethany, ever the manipulator, tried to put on a brave face. "It's all a misunderstanding," she insisted. She's easily confused. We were just trying to help her." "Help her by stealing her life savings?" Jerry countered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Help her by manipulating her into signing away her rights? Is that kind of help you offer, Miss Bethany?" The judge slammed her gavel. "Enough," she declared. "I've heard enough. Based on the evidence presented, I find the power of attorney document to be fraudulent. It is hereby revoked. Mrs. Parker, you are fully in control of your assets once again." Tears streamed down my face. Relief washed over me, so profound it almost knocked me off my feet. I had won. I actually won. My little old lady act had worked. I fooled them both. I had faced down those vultures and reclaimed my life. But as I looked at Charles and Bethany, their faces contorted with rage and defeat, a new question arose in my mind. They had tried to rob me of everything I had worked for. They had preyed on my vulnerability. They had shown a complete disregard for my well-being. Will they face justice for what they did?
Lord, what a day. The relief was so intense, so utterly complete, it darn near buckled my knees. The judge's words echoed in my ears. "Mrs. Parker, you are fully in control of your assets once again." I watched as the bailiffs cuffed Charles and Bethany. The look on their faces? Well, honey, it was worth every single gray hair on my head. They actually looked shocked, like they truly believed they were entitled to my money. The nerve of some people. Back in my day, you respected your elders. Now, these young whippersnappers just want what you've got. Jerry, bless his heart, rushed over and gave me the biggest hug. "You did it, Helen! You really did it!" He smelled faintly of stale coffee and that awful, cheap cologne he favors, but right then, it was the sweetest aroma in the world. The courtroom buzzed with activity. Lawyers whispered, reporters scribbled in their notebooks, and Charles and Bethany were led away, their protests fading into the general din. I felt a hand on my arm. It was the judge, her face softening a bit. "Mrs. Parker," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle, "I'm so glad this worked out for you. Please be careful. There are people out there who prey on the vulnerable." "I will, Your Honor," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "I've learned my lesson the hard way." Jerry escorted me out of the courtroom and into the crowded hallway. Paparazzi flashed cameras at us as we struggled through the crowd. "Let's get you out of here, Helen," he said, steering me towards the courthouse cafeteria. "You deserve a cup of Earl Grey. My treat." The cafeteria was surprisingly calm, a stark contrast to the chaos we'd just left behind. We found a quiet corner table, and Jerry went to order. I sat down heavily, feeling the ache and my arthritis settle into my bones. It had been a long day, a long few months, actually. As I waited for Jerry, I pulled out my iPhone and checked my messages. A few texts from worried friends and family, and a notification from Wells Fargo about a large deposit, my money, finally back where it belonged. I smiled. Jerry returned with my team and a sad-looking donut. "Here you go, Helen," he said, placing the cup in front of me. "Extra hot, just the way you like it." I took a sip,
the familiar flavor soothing my frayed nerves. "Thank you, Jerry. I don't know what I would have done without you." "Nonsense, Helen," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "You did all the work. I just pointed you in the right direction." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping our tea and watching the people around us. Then a man approached our table. He was tall and thin, dressed in a dark suit that looked far too expensive for this place. He had a severe haircut and eyes that seemed to bore right through you. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I tensed. "Yes?" "My name is Mr. Davies, and I'm an associate." He paused, as if searching for the right word. "I've been observing the proceedings." I didn't take his hand. "Observing?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "From what vantage point, exactly?" He ignored my question. "I understand you were targeted by Charles and Bethany regarding investments in Shore Investments?" My guard went up immediately. "Who wants to know?" "Let's just say," he continued, his eyes flicking around the cafeteria, "that there are other interested parties who were disappointed in the outcome of today's hearing." Jerry cleared his throat. "Look, pal, Mrs. Parker has been through enough. Why don't you take your business elsewhere?" Mr. Davies didn't even glance at Jerry. His focus remained solely on me. "Mrs. Parker, Shore Investments is a complex operation. Charles and Bethany were merely small cogs in a much larger machine. Their area of expertise was apparently real estate." He paused again, allowing that to sink in. Real estate? That was odd. Charles and Bethany had never mentioned real estate. They had pitched me something about foreign currency exchange and a revolutionary algorithm. I distinctly remember they'd had glossy brochures showing upward trending graphs and complex financial jargon. I'd even seen something about a phantom factor in their documentation, though I hadn't understood its function at the time. It seemed to be a risk mitigation strategy, something to do with automated trading. Mr. Davies leaned closer. "There are others, Mrs. Parker, who are, shall we say, invested in Shore Investments, and they are not as forgiving as you are." He straightened up, his face expressionless. "Consider this a friendly warning. You may have won this battle, but the war, my dear, is far from the over." He placed a small, unmarked card on the table. "If you need anything," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "don't hesitate to call." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. I stared at the card, a chill running down my spine. Who was this man, and what other shadowy figures were involved in Shore Investments? The game was far from over.